Hey, peace and blessings. It's your brother Sorry back with yet another one. Um, peace to the ancestors. You know what I'm saying? I always have to shout them out. Appreciate their contributions. I mean, and we already talked about the feedback loop. As we get into some of this material, we've already discussed the feedback loop between the ancestor or the ancestral realm and the descendants, which would be us, those of the true and living, as we call ourselves. Um, yeah, I mean, so feeding that force and kind of acknowledging those who kind of came before us is a relevant thing, as we've seen on previous videos. Go back to the video about ancestral veneration. Um, yeah, and peace to the true and living. Who's the true and living? If you've been following any of these videos, a lot of this subject matter. Um, to metaphorically say, if you go back and do an autopsy on some of the bodies of work that we just kind of left laying around in our playlist, what I mean, you can kind of see how we've been fleshing this thing out. We're still following the same thought experiment as far as the bioetheric feedback loop. The bioetheric feedback loop comes from it's a the book True Master, it's three sections of it: self to self, self to others, and others to self. Self to self is heavily based on the experiential system developed in the 90s by the brother Naju. Self to others is myself filtering certain concepts from and mechanics of a martial art through the experiential. And this is the third portion of True Master. This is the portion that I never really talked about. The others to self portion. This is the portion that talks about it's more science heavy information. In this portion, we're dealing with the idea that the body is electric. We arrive at that by the research of Robert Becker, Jerry Tennant, several people, several doctors and everything like that. We're filtering it through the electrical framework of Nikola Tesla. So it's no electrons and particles. We're dealing more so with field-based things or whatever, and it's more compatible with esoteric phenomena because it's based on the metaphysics of Swami Vivekananda. Let me see here. Yeah, we're dealing with Tesla's physics, and we're running with the notion that the soul is an electrical phenomenon. Now, we're viewing the soul as an electrical phenomenon, and as I've said before, the first person in modern times to kind of deal with the soul from that perspective is Pascal Beverly Randolph. Um, Randolph and Tesla did not live at the same time, so this is an interesting contrast to some of their thoughts and everything like that. So, with no further ado, in our efforts to hold down this section of the internet, I present to you another, the latest issue of Ether Illustrated. In Ether Illustrated, we're gonna be taking this bioetheric feedback loop, and we're gonna be doing various case studies on various things or whatever case may be, just filtering different scenarios through the bioetheric feedback loop framework and seeing what nuances we get. You see what I'm saying? So, with no further ado, on this one, this is going to be an interesting one, right? This is going to be one that talks about the legal modulation of karmic volatility. So, what do I even mean when I say that, right? Um, this comes from, it was a case study that was done, and it was a comparison between um, in all of this material, we've been dealing with the idea that when there's a level of coercion, it creates a negative blowback in the feedback loop, or negative karma, or whatever case may be, or unfavorable experiences, or whatever case may be, whenever coercion is enacted or what have you. So when you compare, let's say, the situation as far as the untouchables in India, the Dalits in India and everything with the caste system and everything like that, and you compare the situation of Jim Crow in the United States and everything like that, just as a case study. And this is not a, a, a guilt trip or anything on white people. You know what I mean? I'm pro-black as ever, but I still got, white people that I do respect, you know what I'm saying, white friends or whatever case may be, so that I really don't go too hard on the whole racial thing or whatever case may be. You know what I mean? Let me see here. It could even be contrast. We just don't have the data as far as when in the ancient world when Caucasians were enslaved for thousands of years. We just don't have the data on it. You see what I'm saying? To really do a case study on that. So that's why we're kind of doing a case study on the transatlantic slave trade and the situation with the untouchables in India. Now, the relevance behind any of that, it shows how it affects the karma of what's being done when it's legal to mistreat somebody, basically. When the law has been modulated to render a person less of a human being or whatever case may be, and it's acceptable under the law to mistreat someone, how does that affect the karmic implications of that? You see what I'm saying? So we're going to explore, we're going to do a bit of a case study in that. Yeah. So if you like what you've been hearing, some of these little case studies, we're going into the bioetheric feedback loop. You see what I'm saying? The feedback loop from the soul of the individual. Everything we do is a part of the feedback loop. Everything we think, feel, all of our actions, as you said, the language of situations, all of that stuff like that. Um, um, that's a part of the feedback loop or what have you. Like Dolores Cannon says in her information, when we get sick, the sicknesses that we experience or whatever case may be, there's psychological trauma or what have you that we have not dealt with in our physical, in our waking life, in our physical experience as far as actions is concerned. So it manifests as an illness. It can manifest as an acausal situation, like how Carl Jung talks about. Now, how we spoke about previously when we talked about the ancestors and all that, we talked about how the individual is part of a collective, and the collective or what have you has a collective level of karma and everything like that. You see what I'm saying? So that's a whole, and it manifests in the society in a certain type of way. You see what I'm saying? So just kind of like, I don't know, just touching on that or whatever, kind of framing the discussion. So let's kind of get into this a little bit. The legal modulation of karmic volatility. All right, a comparative analysis of systemic debt and societal equilibrium. Okay, the part one, the bioetheric feedback loop and the calculus of societal karma. The calculus of societal karma. Okay, introduction to the universal energetic law. Karma as the unerring law of compensation, right? The foundation, because in this, how can I really say it? Karma wasn't initially going into this material when I was writing the book and everything like that. Karma was not the ultimate focus or what have you. And I wouldn't say it's still the ultimate focus, but it is a very, very strong aspect of the feedback loop. Karma is a part of the feedback loop. We view the soul as an electrical entity or whatever case may be, not taking anything away from it being a spiritual phenomenon, but we're filtering it through the idea of it being electrical so we can bring out more nuances or whatever. If it be electrical, however, karma would be a part of the feedback loop, which would also suggest that living one life, you could not work out all the karma that's implied, because again, any astrologer will tell you that the details of a person's life are established for the most part at the moment they take their first breath. They can discern information about the duration of that person's life from that moment or whatever case may be. So there's a blueprint aspect of it all. Okay, so the foundational understanding of universal order posits that existence is governed by the unerring law of compensation, known as karma, derived from the Sanskrit word of action. Karma encapsulates the entire cycle of cause and its resultant effect and its resultant effects, operating consistently across the physical, mental, and spiritual planes of being. This dynamic principle dictates that order pervades the manifested universe, ensuring that every thought, desire, or action inherently affects the equilibrium of the cosmos. Every thought, because every thought, um, desire, or action contributes to this feedback loop. Because then we say that the fascia and the bone and all that is piezoelectric. So all the trauma and stress and all the situations of your life or whatever, it's it develops. It's basically an electrical signal that's distributed through your body down to the DNA level. And the DNA, as we said, was a fractal antenna that goes back to the blueprint. That's why in magical workings or whatever we talked about, women in the South who do, magic or whatever case, maybe putting period blood in people's spaghetti. Yeah, because the blood has the person's DNA in it, and it creates a link to that person or whatever, because the spirit is in the blood. That's in the Bible, ain't it? So, the spirit is in the blood or whatever, because the DNA is in the blood, and the DNA links us back to the blueprint. We age because we lose access to the blueprint and the degradation of the mitochondrial DNA. You see what I'm saying? So this dynamic principle dictates that order pervades the manifested universe, ensuring that every thought, desire, and action inherently affects the equilibrium of cosmos. Once harmony is distributed, the universe seeks to restore that balance, a process defined as the operation of karma, right? A process defined as the operation of karma or whatever. Once harmony is distributed, the universe seeks to restore the balance. So we talked about this on previous videos, how you have the perfection of the blueprint. The blueprint is perfect or whatever. The world that we live in is not so perfect. So there's a differential between the two or whatever. And a lot of the experiences that we have are designed to bring the world we live in closer to the perfection of the blueprint, if that makes any sense, in a super oversimplified kind of way of saying it. Um, the implications of the universal law are profound for both the individual and the collective. The universe is inherently self-correcting. It's inherently self-correcting. The fabric of space, the fabric of time, it's all self-correcting. We said that on numerous other videos and everything like that. Correspondences or karmic debt are never circumvented or denied, though their manifestation may be delayed. Remember, we talked about that on, go back to previous videos where we kind of had that conversation, where we talked about immediate consequences and delayed consequences. Anytime that there's a level of delayed consequences or whatever case may be, it creates a bubble, and there's a time frame or whatever for that circumstance to play out until that bubble pops or whatever, and then it goes back to the way that it was. We talked about independence kind of being like that. Go back to the 48 laws of power. We were talking about that. Independence kind of be like that. Human beings are interdependent. We're communal beings or whatever case may be. When certain things happen in society where we have heightened technology, we have the luxury of independence or whatever case may be. But when society goes back to the way that it inevitably does go, or whatever, we have to rely on one another again or whatever. So various different bubbles or what have you. Okay, so the implications of this universal law are profound for both the individual and the collective. The individual and the collective. The individual is a part of the collective. The universe is inherently self-correcting. Consequences or karmic debt are never circumvented or denied, though their manifestation may be delayed, sometimes extending across multiple lifetimes. Multiple lifetimes, right? The pursuit of happiness and peace is intrinsically linked to halting the flow of selfish action. As long as collective self-grasping actions motivated purely by self-interest and ignorance persist within a society, that society remains under the continuous influence of karmic law, effectively limiting the exercise of true collective free will. And we're gonna kind of get into that on another video about how free will is actually kind of tainted. You see what I'm saying? Like how we said before, I could have three people sitting right here who are exercising their free will. This dude's free will is to go make $1,000,000. That's his free will. This dude's free will is to go get married and have kids. This dude's free will is to go sit in his mom's basement all day and play video games. That's their all three of them are exercising their free will. But there are other factors that contribute to why they want to do the things that they want to do. Why doesn't the guy that sits home and play video games, why isn't his free will to go and make $1,000,000 or whatever the case may be? Because there are certain acausal factors. An astrologer would tell you, okay, at the moment that they take their first breath, those factors are visible on the chart. You see what I'm saying? So there's certain other factors that contribute. So free will is kind of tainted to an extent. Not saying we don't have free will, but it is kind of tainted. Okay, the pursuit of happiness and peace is intrinsically linked to the halting the flow of selfish action, as long as collective self-grasping actions motivated purely by self-interest and let's go back up in that. Let's go back in that. The implications of this universal law are profound for both the individual and the collective. The universe inherently self-correcting. Consequences of karmic debt are never circumvented or denied, though their manifestations may be delayed, sometimes extending across multiple lifetimes. The pursuit of happiness and peace is intrinsically linked to halting the flow of selfish action. As long as collective self-grasping actions motivated purely by self-interest and ignorance persist within the society, that society remains under the collective flow of karmic law or whatever, effectively limiting the exercise of true collective free will, because you're always paying for all the negative stuff you did. Because anytime there's an act of coercion, that brings about a negative situation or circumstance for you in the feedback loop, whether it be delayed or not. And as we said in previous videos, whenever that's the purpose that ancient people did sacrifice for. Sacrifice rewrites it. So there's a debt. So there's a debt. So the amount of coercion, if you do some coercive act or whatever case may be, there would have to be something to offset that or whatever case may be. You see what I'm saying? Um, in another, how can I really say it? In another case study that was done, we'll probably, throw this one out there on wax. Another case study that was done, we were talking about if you have a if you have a place that's basically founded upon a large scale um, economy based on coercion, not calling no names, you feel me? And that's going to build up a huge karmic debt for um, that country or that place or whatever case may be. So in essence, they will have to continuously fight wars and do covert actions and sacrifice in order to maintain this. But it would be some manner of karmic debt that's going on or whatever case may be, probably equivalent to a financial debt. It may potentially mirror some other debt in their society, like some sort of financial debt, not calling no names. But anyway, um okay, so I'm not even gonna speak on that. So many thoughts go through my head on so many different things. The implication of this universal law are profound. We already talked about that. The bioetheric feedback loop uh, hypothesis, law as the conscious modulator of energetic volatility. All right. Let's see here. Okay, last little part. When a society through systematic action binds itself through selfish deeds and thoughts, it generates a substantial and interconnected moral liability, defining its collective destiny. Okay, so the bioetheric feedback loop hypothesis, law is a conscious modulator of energetic volatility. The operation of collective karma manifests through the bioetheric feedback loop as a conceptual mechanism representing the inevitable return of energetic consequences to the societal system. Okay, when systematic actions generate high energetic imbalances or debt, when systematic actions generate high energy imbalances or debt, the resulting bioetheric feedback loop presents a chaotic feedback culminating in social volatility, political strife, or catastrophic collapse. Okay, so let's read that again. When the systematic actions generate high energetic imbalances or debt, high levels of coercion. Let's say, like, if you marginalize somebody in the society or whatever case may be, and they're basically, I don't know, they're the person that does all the work in society. Let's say like in the case with the Dalit people in India and everything like that. They're the untouchables. They do all the menial tasks and everything like that. And through some level of coercion. The resulting biweekly feedback loop presents the chaotic feedback culminating in social volatility, political strife, or catastrophic collapse. Now, so in the case study, as far as the untouchables, it's a different thing because they have sanchita karma, so they have a belief in karma or understanding of karma themselves or whatever, so they rationalize their position. um I'm not trying to speak for everybody or what have you, but on a generalized thing, it's more of a rationalization of that position in society as being a result of some bad karma in a previous life. So it's more of a reconciliation in the mind because of the idea of Sanchita karma as far as in that society. So that's what maintains the balance in that, in without some volatile, without levels of volatility as far as in that society. In American society or whatever case may be, that was not the case or whatever. Um, you see what I'm saying? There was constant um, social friction and everything like that in American society. I'm not going to get into all of that. We all know that. We all read history and are familiar with that. So all your riots and all your things or whatever, COINTELPRO and all this stuff like that. So that or whatever case may be. So there had to be things in place, social collective things in place. Um, um, because we're on YouTube, and I'm gonna just be real. I don't know, sanitized about what I'm gonna say. There would be social, there would be collective, let's say, executions or collective demonstrations or whatever case may be. Um, Sort of like if you read about the whole thing in the Bible about the scapegoat and everything like that, where you put the sins of on on the goat and then you run him off the cliff or whatever case may be. Certain public rituals or whatever case may be that would I don't know, re-energize the morale of the people and solidify the what was being done in society, so to speak. So like a sacrifice, so to speak, to offset the negative feedback. You see what I'm saying? Um, I'm trying to speak it in a certain kind of way. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so legal structures therefore function as powerful bioetheric feedback loop modulators. Legal structures function as powerful bioetheric feedback loop modulators. All human laws, from the scientific to the moral, are fundamentally expressed of the underlying universal tendency toward harmonic restoration, right? All universal laws, where all human laws, from the scientific to the moral, are fundamentally expressions of the underlying universal tendency toward harmonic restoration. You're trying to heal the system, or you're supposed to be trying to do that. Codified law thus attempts to manage, channel, or suppress this energetic feedback. So it's an actual energetic function that the law actually um, is supposed to fulfill. It's supposed to help this system out. You see what I'm saying? The efficacy of law in managing volatility is inextricably linked to the principle of intention. Intention, right? Actions motivated by goodwill or cetana in Buddhism can yield significant karmic merits, profoundly altering the magnitude and character of the resultant bioetheric feedback loop. All right. So good karma stuff or whatever offsets negative feedback from the feedback loop. Conversely, when law is intentionally employed to oppress or institutionalize self-interest, right? When the law has been corrupted, or when you have it's words for this, um, but let's just say when the law has been misapplied or used incorrectly, or used corruptly, or used as a vehicle to punish some people or some group of people, it generates greater debt. Okay, so conversely, when law is intentionally employed to oppress or institutionalize self-interest, it generates greater debt. A key contradiction arises when human law attempts to achieve public tranquility, i.e., stabilization of imbalance. Okay, through systematic falsehood. Right. So now we're getting into making a person less than a person to kind of normalize their mistreatment. So this is what we're getting into. Public tranquility, i.e., stabilization of imbalance through systematic falsehoods such as the legal erasure of personhood. In such instances, the legal framework acts only to externalize or delay the inevitable corrective energetic feedback. Because remember, we talked about a bubble. We talked about when you create these artificial situations or whatever, you create a bubble, and that cycle runs or whatever until something pops the bubble and it goes back to the way it is, because nature is always seeking to correct itself or what have you. So let's see here. Um, in such instances, the legal framework acts only to externalize or delay the inevitable corrective energetic feedback, ensuring that the underlying debt persists and volatility accumulates. So basically, it's delaying the inevitable. But the punchline in this is the law is put there to, or the law can be put there to dampen the effect, to dampen the karmic effect or whatever case may be, and kind of buy some time or whatever. This is kind of like how the law modulates the energy in the sense of a society or whatever case may be. So in a lot of cases, interestingly enough, lawyers, judges, people like that are almost have a similar function. Like when we went into the energetic, excuse me, the bioetheric engineering of, let's say, Ifa and Palo Mayombe, and we were talking about the priests in that society and what the priests did, the function of the priest. We say the law of Ma'at is basically like pressure mediation. Then we say that, and then we say that's basically the function of the priest in the society. They do sacrifices and they do things or whatever case may be to modulate the karmic or the energetic stability of the civilization or whatever case may be. They govern in their society based on this feedback loop or whatever case may be. No different in our society or whatever case may be. Lawyers and judges will fulfill a lot of these functions as well as, because if the laws that we govern ourselves by modulate the energy within a social construct or whatever case may be, your judges, lawyers, or whatever case may be, would be the priests of um, that aspect of it anyway. So that's a very interesting correlation. Like I said, we come with all kind of different little nuances once we kind of get into some of this material from this perspective. Okay, so let's see here. This guarantees continuous influence from the bioetheric feedback loop and cyclical social volatility, the goal of liberation. Hold on one second. The consequence of interconnected individual actions resonating across time and space is the. Hold on one second. I just want to make sure I ain't miss nothing. Let me hit it from the top. Quantifying karmic violations. Quantifying karmic violations, magnitude, frequency, and systemic debt. Societal karmic volatility can be analyzed according to two dimensions: magnitude and frequency. High magnitude, low frequency violations are associated with acute catastrophic imbalances that lead to explosive social instability, such as revolutions or civil wars. So let's go back. Social karmic volatility can be analyzed across two dimensions: magnitude and frequency. High magnitude, low frequency violations are associated with acute catastrophic imbalances. High magnitude, low frequency is like a bombing or something, like the Twin Towers or something like that. Catastrophic imbalances that can lead to explosive social instability, such as revolutions or civil wars. Conversely, low magnitude, high frequency happens all the time, but it's interwoven in the fabric of society. Violations are those that are chronic, pervasive, and institutionalized, right? Resulting in entrenched low-level systemic stress and injustice, right? So this is like a time release type thing. If somebody, attack Pearl Harbor or whatever the case may be. That's the first one. That's the high magnitude, low frequency. That doesn't happen every day or whatever the case may be. But certain social systems or whatever case may be are put in place, and this is not, I know in this case study, some of the stuff that we drawing from is dealing maybe with the untouchables in India, maybe dealing with the um Africans in America as well, and Jim Crow and all that stuff like that. Those are case studies, but it's not limited to that. I mean, you can apply this same framework to um, war, World War II Germany, pre-World War II Germany, and stuff like that. The whole, the Holocaust and everything like that. Anytime people are kind of marginalized in the system or whatever, and you kind of have enough data, you can kind of, you can kind of look at the energetic implications of this stuff. It does the same thing. The consequence of interconnected individual actions resonating across time and space is the accumulation of systemic debt, requiring collective accountability. When law explicitly supports the selfish deeds of a dominant group, for instance, codifying the exploitation of labor for profit maximization, the entire legal and social structure embodies collective self-grasping. This guarantees continuous influence from the bioetheric feedback loop and cyclical social volatility. The goal of liberation or moksha becomes unachievable until the system's foundational intention shifts from self-interest. Wow, so you can't even really that's very interesting, because in a lot of cases, as we have these conversations and we talk about, we're gonna do another one probably after this one, the bioetheric engineering of homicide. So I think I can say that on YouTube, but the bioetheric engineering of homicide, we're gonna do that one. Because that ties heavily into the whole idea, like how we were talking about necromancy. We were talking about interrupting the entropic process with some sort of ritual intervention or whatever case may be, or some large burst of energy or whatever case may be. And in the concept of Palo that bound the person to the Nganga or the cauldron or whatever case may be, where they could be utilized for their service or whatever case may be. Similarly, in the concept of a homicide or whatever case may be, it's a trauma bond between the victim and the killer or whatever case may be. Um, Based on the case study that we're gonna do, the only time that's really reconciled is when that person when it's unalive sewer, when it's an unalive suicide, you know what I'm saying, that type of deal. It kind of cancels itself out. But other than that, the same scenario how you got with the Palero, if he doesn't if certain things go wrong in his operation, the deceased person that he's attempting to enlist their services, they can kill him if all goes wrong or whatever case may be. Similarly, with the bioetheric engineering of homicide, the person is kind of bound to their killer or whatever to an extent, and that's a recipe for a person to haunt you. That's kind of like why we get into this, because there's a culture of drill music and things like that in the culture, but a lot of these aspects of things are not really discussed or whatever case may be. And I know my non-believers, shout out to my non-believers, I know people would say, well, I don't believe in this or that. Yet if you talk to people in the military who have been in the service, and they've had to unalive people and stuff like that, they still see their faces. So there's some sort of feedback loop between the victim and the unaliver. There's that does exist, and that is a thing. So that's why we have these conversations. It's not to for any level of clickbait or shock value. I know in today's society that's a thing. And I know anybody who does astrology, from time to time, you do readings for certain people, you run across things like that in people's charts. And I'll be the first one to tell you, bro, I don't even want to know the details of what happened in that situation. I just see something like that. I kind of got an idea what it is when I see it. I don't want to know. But anyway, but that's something that a conversation to be had. My in video rant, ladies and gentlemen. So substantive law versus procedural law. So when we talk about this, you got the law breaks down You have natural law, which is said to be God's law, however, how nature works or whatever case may be. Positive law, which is man's law. Substantive law, the substance of the law or whatever, the substance of the doctrine itself or whatever case may be, whole doctrines or whatever case may be. Procedural law, how you, the procedure, um, that you craft out of the substance of that doctrine, the procedure to execute the law. Remedial law, that's the remedy that you get from whatever you're trying to do. If you have a situation where you're owed some money or whatever, you craft a procedure or whatever case may be, where you sue the person or whatever, or put a lien on some property or whatever case may be. And that's the process. The remedy would be you getting money or whatever. Just say that person pays you for your lien. You have public and private and all that, or whatever case may be. Public is more so between the government or the municipality and the person. Private is between two people or whatever. So the law breaks down kind of like that, or whatever case may be. Man, shout out to Yusufel, man. Kind of dealing with shout out to Texas, man. Shout out to Yusufel, bro, because it was years of time, but we kind of delved in that subject matter right there. And that brother was still is a beast as far as that subject matter, and he been consistently kind of putting it down as far as that. So I gotta give my brother some show my brother some love on that. Um, so the distinction between substantive and procedural law is crucial for understanding how societies attempt to manage karmic debt. The substantive law defines duties and rights, declaring what constitutes a violation and prescribes punishment. Oppressive regimes manipulate substantive law to redefine the victim, e.g., a non-human property. Okay. Oppressive regimes manipulate substantive law to redefine the victim as less of a person. It's okay. We can take things from them, or whatever case may be. And this is not just um, in certain places in ancient laws or whatever case may be. You have certain things like this or whatever case may be. I know in Roman law you got the different levels of rights, capitis maxima, capitis minima, you see what I'm saying? The various levels of rights and everything like that. So this has various different manifestations in different societies, different ways or whatever. Oppressive regimes manipulate substantive law to redefine the victim, e.g. as non-human property, thereby attempting to retroactively lower the perceived energetic magnitude of violation. So you can do something to this person and it holds less weight in society or whatever. The laws are modulating the karmic circumstance of that particular action or whatever case may be, right? So Jim Crow laws, for example, were substantive mechanisms that institutionalized segregation and forced separation ostensibly to protect white superiority. These laws stabilize the oppressive structure by making imbalance the legal norm, right? It's like being in an abusive relationship with somebody or whatever case may be. And this is a correlation. Being in a abusive relationship with somebody or whatever case may be, and you're used to a healthy relationship and you're used to doing things a particular way, but that person kind of does it a different way. Let's say like they might um yell at you or want to argue with you in public. You know that's not a normal thing or whatever case may be, but they try to normalize it and make it a normal thing or whatever, to the point where that's the norm of the relationship, and it gradually starts spiraling and stepping out of control or whatever, something similar to that. Okay, so um, let's see here. Procedural law regulates the methods by which duties and rights are enforced. In oppressive systems, procedural law is utilized to control the rate and form of the bioetheric feedback loop discharge, ensuring subordination and maintaining public tranquility, right? Uh, hmm, that's interesting. The rate and form of it, or whatever case may be. The procedural law and stuff like that. So how the people who are marginalized are going to be basically dealt with or whatever case may be in the various different um I don't know, social systems or whatever case may be. Laws can be designed either to stabilize an existing oppressive structure or to initiate genuine correction. Corrective law, such as Civil Rights Acts of 1964, seeks to define rights and restore energetic equilibrium. By acknowledging and beginning to clear historical debt, stabilizing laws conversely function by institutionalizing the debt. By acknowledging and beginning to clear historical debt, stabilizing laws conversely function by institutionalizing the debt, the karmic debt that they're talking about, relying on procedural enforcements to maintain control under this suppressed energetic tension inevitably forces a chaotic correction or whatever the case may be. So you're normalizing the mistreatment of somebody, and it basically unless it's something in place like the Sanchita karma in the case of the Dravidians or whatever the case may be, this is just going to breed resentment over time, and it's just going to keep building up and building up until something happens or whatever. People will just be pissed off with the system until it just until something eventually happens. Let's see here. Let's see. Stabilizing law defines duties, rights, institutionalizes systemic imbalance as norm. Let's see. Social goal lowers perceived violation magnitude, institutionalizes debt, maintains public tranquility. Jim Crow laws, definition of slave as property. Okay, procedural, and that could also correspond, like I say, to the untouchables. You see what I'm saying? That could correspond to Nazi Germany and everything like that, the classifications of the people and the people in the ghettos and everything like that. So that it could qualify on various different levels and everything like that. Let's see, it regulates the means to punishment. Procedural law regulates the means to punish, enforce existing substantive debt, manages debt discharge through controlled, sometimes violent channels, ensures subordination, legalized brutality, discipline in chattel slavery. Basically, it makes it okay for you to do something to a particular class of person. Um, that could even be applied almost to, let's say, like a homeless person or something like that. I mean, also in our society, less so. It's a little bit less so, but somewhat. Substantive law redefines rights, attempts to restore energetic equilibrium, acknowledges and clears historical systematic debt, establishes free labor principles, Civil Rights Act of 1964, 13th Amendment. So that's a substantive law, a corrective substantive law, or whatever case may be. It's designed to kind of correct some of the ills in the system, to prevent the ultimate inevitable consequences of, let's say, like some sort of revolution in the society or whatever case may be. Corrective laws kind of like make these adjustments. Okay, so part two, devaluation mechanism, laws that diminish human resource value, defining personhood versus property, the legal frontier of energetic contraction. For any system of systematic exploitation to be economically viable and legally defensible, the oppressed party must be legally relegated from a person possessing inherent rights and energetic equivalence to a resource possessing only exploitable value, right? So they cannot be a person, they can't have humanity or whatever the case may be. They must be relegated to a resource. The core energetic contradiction inherent in slavery is the legal necessity to exploit a resource that maintains the power of reason and choice. Exploiting a resource that maintains the power of reason and choice. This internal conflict generates tremendous, unresolvable energetic volatility that requires constant, often violent management. Yeah, because again, it's not a true resource. It's not a true resource in the sense of something in an inanimate object or whatever. It's a person. So you're dealing with a level of incoherence. You're coercing this person into doing something that they really don't want to do. So that has an energetic backlash in itself. So this internal conflict generates tremendous unresolvable energetic volatility that requires often violent management or whatever the case may be, similar to the Paletto having to feed um, um, the spirit and everything like that. You see what I'm saying? But in this case, you will have public demonstrations, or you will have certain rituals or whatever the case may be that would mitigate the volatility of the coercion of what you're doing. The essential function of codified law in such systems is to precisely delineate the boundary between aspects in which the enslaved are considered persons, subject to certain protections, often for the economic benefit of the master, and aspects in which they are mere resources, subject to simple resource use. This legal maneuver attempts to diminish the karmic debt associated with the harm inflicted, right? So let's read that again. The essential function of codified law in such systems is to precisely delineate the boundary between aspects in which the enslaved are considered persons, subject to certain protections, often for the economic benefit of the master, and aspects in which they are mere resources, subject to simple resource use. This legal maneuver attempts to diminish the karmic debt associated with the harm inflicted by institutionalizing the falsehood that the act is merely property management rather than the violation of a fellow human being. So in the back of your mind, in the back of your mind, just like how we said before, in the whole death thing or whatever the case may be, and being judged and all that, it's not anybody standing over your shoulders counting how many times you prayed or whatever the case may be, but it's your feet telling on you for every place you've been that you shouldn't have been. Your eyes telling on you for everything you've seen you shouldn't have seen. Shout out Dr. Malachi York for that particular breakdown, because that's where I get that breakdown from. But yeah, nobody's standing over your shoulder. So when you're abusing this other person and you saying, okay, well, according to the law, this person is not really a person, in the back of your mind, you can look at him and tell he's a person. You see what I'm saying? You know he's a person just like you. You see what I'm saying? And so that's a whole nother aspect of it. The whole aspect of karma, as we're gonna talk about when we get into the whole thing about homicide, it weighs heavily on malicious intent. So your intent, all that stuff plays into the weight of the action and the negative feedback that you get from it. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so and this case study, when we do case studies like this is an extreme. You see what I'm saying? Like slavery, human trafficking, things of that nature, or whatever case may be. These are extremes, or whatever case may be. However, on a lesser level, you can kind of see how this plays out into how we view people in society, period. It may not be on a level you view a person as less than human or whatever. It may be, interactions between men and women or whatever. You may not view this person as your equal in society. You may feel like you got 20 degrees and this person ain't got nothing. And you know what I'm saying? You feel like you're more accomplished or whatever case may be. However it may go, you see what I'm saying? On a lesser level, you're not enslaving nobody, but on a lesser level, all of your thoughts and all that stuff like that, it plays into the feedback loop. So this is just, like I say, we doing case studies on this to kind of try to illustrate the ether real quick. You know what I mean? Um, the profounder the denial of personhood, the higher the energetic contradiction becomes, demanding more explosive corrective measures, high bioetheric feedback loop to keep the system stable, right? So the profounder the denial of personhood, the more you deny that this person is a human being or whatever, the higher the energetic contradiction. You see what I'm saying? Demanding more explosive corrective measures to keep the system stable. Wow. So I'm not gonna speak on that, but how can I really say? I think in society, um, when we make other contradictions within the energy, when we say something is something that is not, I think that actually holds weight in the feedback loop as well, similar to this, what we're talking about here, or whatever. I'm not going to get into all that. I think those of you who listen to me can read between the lines of what I'm saying. Um, the codification of chattel, U.S. slavery and definition of human life as resource. The chattel slavery system in the United States predominantly focused on Africans and African ancestors from 1526 to 1865, utilizes an extensive legal framework to define and subordinate enslaved people. Laws authorized permanent bondage, defined enslaved individuals as absolute legal property or chattel. This legal definition ensured the master's domination was conferred by the laws of man at least, by the laws of man at least, if not by the law of God. So that's another thing when we talked about what was it, the bioetheric engineering of hoodoo and everything like that. Remember how, the spells, remember how, okay, so in this, remember how we talking about the law modulates the energy in society. Judges and lawyers are damn near like priests and everything like that, or whatever case may be. Remember how we talked about when you're dealing with a book of Psalms or whatever case may be, the authority for the spell is coming from God, right? Not saying that what you're doing is right or wrong, but the perceived authority for the spell is coming from God. Remember we talked about when we go into, let's say, like Egyptian magic or whatever, the Egyptian magical papyri and stuff like that. When we talk about, you know what I'm saying, you might have a particular deity or whatever that has other demons and things that are subordinate to him or whatever case may be, certain menial tasks that that deity would not do, but he has sway over a particular category of life or whatever case may be. So he might have a daemon under him that can buckle your shoe under the command of that particular deity, given authority from that particular deity. So it's a similar thing or whatever case may be. So that's another look into the how it corresponds with the magical aspect of things or whatever case may be. What's perceived magical, we talking about it electrically. All of this is electrically. Is commonly that will be a magical, I don't know, correlation or whatever case may be. But as you can see, the law corresponds to that. The law modulates the energy in a society similar to how a priest would. You see what I'm saying? The system was designed to maximize perpetuation of debt through hereditary codification, declaring that all their issue and offspring born or to be born were thereafter deemed absolute slaves. This established a generational transfer of karmic debt. A generational transfer of karmic debt, trapping future generations in a continuous negative cycle. This illegal erasure of personhood was deemed essential not only to the value of the slaves as property, but also to the security of the master and the overall public tranquility of the slaveholding society. By formally denying the personhood of a rational sentient being, the legal structure attempted to contain an energetic paradox. An energetic paradox, because if that's a rational human being, that rational human being is owed certain things or whatever the case may be, energetically. You see what I'm saying? If they do certain work in a society, they're owed certain retribution or whatever the case may be. And we're not really, how can I really say this? I'm not even really, we just talking energetically. You see what I'm saying? Any implications or conversations that come out of what I'm saying, that just be that. Let the chips fall where they may. We just having a conversation about the energetic implications, and we're just using this as a case study. Whatever come out of this, let that be that. It is quite thought provoking, though, I must say. By formally denying the personhood of a rational sentient being, the legal structure attempted to contain an energetic paradox, resulting in an inherently unstable foundation that required continuous application of external force to prevent internal implosion. So it has to be, you have to employ these rituals, what I'm talking about. You see what I'm saying? Like a scapegoat type of deal, or whatever case may be, often violent rituals to kind of like maintain the order within a society or whatever case may be. But it's still adding to that debt, because that's even further coercion and everything like that. And this is not limited to this. We see this also like when we did the case study on the Aztec civilization and stuff like that. We see that also. This is not the only place and time on earth that this takes place. This is not the only group of people who do this. So this is just a case study. So I'm not trying to, I don't know, I'm not trying to vilify any particular group of people. I'm not trying to have a pity Olympics for any particular group of people. This is just a case study. We're just trying to have a mature conversation in this. Because again, like I said, we just don't have as many details as far as the slave trade in the Black Sea region to do a case study on that. But that's a thing or whatever case may be. So in certain conversations, even the slavery in the transatlantic slave trade is a karmic blowback from something that was done earlier. You see what I'm saying? Let's see. Legal mechanisms inhibiting self-renewal capacity. In an energetic or societal context, self-renewal refers to the capacity of an individual or group to recover, repair, gain agency, and break free from a debt cycle. Oppressive legal systems often contain mechanisms specifically designed to inhibit this capacity, thereby perpetuating the imbalance. Debt, bondage, peonage exemplifies this mechanism. It involves pledging a person's service for debt repayment, often with terms so undefined or excessively large that the duration of the service is indefinite. The victim's freedom hinges on the unachievable repayment structure, fundamentally preventing self-renewal. Crucially, debt bondage can be passed down from generation to generation, serving as a historical model for legally entrenching inheritable karmic debt. The practice is analogous to the concept of meamism and homeopathic theory, a inherited energetic disharmony or disease pattern, right? Where oppressive laws function to codify the transfer of this energetic blueprint of suffering across subsequent generations. Wow. So the law stabilizes and codifies a blueprint of energetic suffering or some sort of karmic pattern and everything like that. Wow. Mm. Uh, and like how we said with the bondage thing or whatever, you know, I'm pretty sure some of this would bound some of the deceased to this realm or whatever, unable to make the most the most comfortable transition because maybe potentially traumatic, I don't know, traumatic death or whatever case may be, certain heartbreak, whatever scenario may be, and these whole little things that are kind of codified in the law and everything like that. So um, this gives us an idea how the law plays into this. This gives us an idea of some of the consequences of writing certain laws or adjusting certain laws to kind of marginalize a particular group of people and stuff like that. Um, it creates a debt. And though it temporarily stabilizes the system to codify certain things into law, you're also stabilizing that um, that debt. You see what I'm saying? You're constantly accruing that debt and everything like that. The externalizing karmic debt, the principle of reflection in social extremities. When a society or dominant group fails to internalize and resolve the energetic consequences of exploitation, when a society or dominant group fails to internalize and resolve the energetic consequences of its exploitation, the karmic debt is frequently externalized onto the victim group. The karmic debt is frequently externalized onto the victim group or the broader environment. This process mirrors the economic concept of externalities, where the indirect cost of transactions are not borne by the transacting party, leading to inefficient and unjust market outcomes. All right. So if anti-discrimination or anti-exploitation laws, the intended correction bioetheric feedback loop modulators, are weak, or if government regulation lacks the consistent and reliable information necessary to track and hold bad actors accountable. So the people who are doing this, who are corrupting the law, are not held accountable, or if the corrective laws, like we talk about civil rights laws and things like that, are put in place, but they're not strong enough to get the necessary effect to actually render justice, so-called, in the system, the systematic debt is externalized as continued suffering onto the victims. Wage theft, defined as the non-payment or underpayment of earned wages, is a direct example of this externalization. The So it just manifests in a different way in the system. The employer benefits by externalizing the cost of labor onto the employees, creating an immediate and specific karmic debt. The removal legislation such as the Wage Theft Prevention and the Wage Recovery Act is necessarily not only the economic justice, but as the direct bioetheric feedback loop mechanism designed to recover the victim's stolen energy, property, and penalize the obfuscation inherent in exploitation. Comparative dynamics. So just to kind of make this distinction, in this, a person being an indentured servant, um, it would be kind of different than what we're talking about when we talk about the chattel slavery thing. Because again, Um, when we examine this stuff, we can look at the bioetheric engineering of it. The bioetheric engineering of an indentured servant would be different than the bioetheric engineering of a person who's in chattel slavery. A bioetheric engineering of an indentured servant, that person would, let's say, have a 7-year indenture, hypothetically, serve out their time, um, be living up under relatively good conditions. They just got to work or whatever case may be. They're treated like a human being and everything like that. They work, and then after they work their 7 years or whatever, they're typically given a large lump sum of money, and they can participate in society normally. So that's the engineering of that. It wouldn't have all this negative feedback in it or whatever case may be. You might have actually did something good for that person. You might have actually taught that person something while they work for you or something like that. I don't know. You see what I'm saying? So that's not necessarily a always a terrible thing, the indentured servitude thing. When we go into the chattel slavery thing or the chattel slave thing, that person is not a person. It's even codified into the law. Their descendants, it's codified in the law where their descendants are of the same status as them or whatever case may be. So it carries this same thing on into the next generation karmically or whatever case may be. So it creates a larger debt than someone being an indentured servant. Okay, so let's see. Societies manage the energetic volatility governed by the systematic oppression through different legal and ideological mechanisms, leading to stark contrast in the bioetheric feedback loop discharge patterns. Case one, the Indian caste system. So we're going to do a couple of case studies of different systems that kind of, I don't know, that kind of have some of this stuff um, going on. Okay, so the Indian caste system and the Dalit experience lowering volatility through ideological anchoring in the birth-based hierarchy. The Indian caste system. So this is going to show the difference in the engineering of the caste system versus the engineering of the chattel slavery thing. Okay, so lowering volatility through ideological anchoring and birth-based hierarchy. So now we're going to get into what Sanchita karma does as far as kind of dampening the karmic blowback from the caste system. The Indian caste system, a social hierarchy based on birth, family, dictates occupation, education, and social interaction. Individuals born with the lowest categories, such as the Dalits, previously untouchables, are historically oppressed, often regulated to low-end jobs due to prevailing beliefs of their low worth. The stability of the caste system, categorized by relatively low chronic volatility, stems from the deep ideological anchoring. Sanchita karma. This system leverages core Hindu concepts such as dharma, righteous duty, and karma by framing a person's low status and suffering as the deserved result of action in a previous life. The dominant caste effectively minimize their perceived contribution to the present karmic debt. Let's see, the dominant caste, the castes that are actually oppressing them, effectively minimize their perceived contribution to the present karmic debt. The systemic violation is thus internalized by the oppressed group as self-inflicted fate, right? Leading to pervasive, entrenched, low-level systemic stress rather than explosive conflict. So they're more accepting of their position in society. It's more of something that they accept. So it's less volatility in it. You see what I'm saying? So it's a higher level of coherence. It goes back into when we talked about the human sacrifice thing. When you have a willing sacrifice and then you have a terrified victim. In the transatlantic chattel slavery thing, we're dealing with more of a terrified victim. Um, if you're dealing with this to kind of over exaggerate it, you would be dealing with a willing sacrifice. You see what I'm saying? So they kind of dealing with they would be dealing with their not saying that they enjoy being an oppressed, marginalized people or whatever case may be, but in the backdrop of their mind, it's more it's a little bit more culturally accepted versus um, in the West that it's not as accepted. This reliance And you can see it's not as accepted when you have certain things like, you know, history records it as the Seminole Wars, but we know the Gullah Wars and everything like that. You know, it was a lot of resistance, that some that's written about and some that's not written about in the West or whatever. So you can kind of see the level of volatility kind of playing out or whatever the case may be, because these conflicts, these wars, these uprisings and things like that, all of those are that's output from the feedback loop. Something is happening to cause that. That's the feedback loop on a societal level. Okay, so this reliance on metaphysical justification proves to be a more effective tool for managing and minimizing the bioetheric feedback loop than reliance on mere legal definition. Okay, because the energetic imbalance is sustained by cultural and religious doctrine. Even when the caste system is officially outlawed, the deep-seated cultural prejudice persists, making effective corrective action difficult or whatever. And it goes to show that you can have a law on the books or whatever case may be, and it can marginalize a certain group of people or whatever. But over time, that tradition, still lingers. The tradition still lingers in the mind of the people, and that's just those behaviors just become a part of the culture. Analysis of cultural prejudice versus legal enforcement and system stabilization. In contrast to the United States system, which requires extensive codified state laws and structures like Jim Crow, the caste system relies primarily on decentralized cultural prejudice and moral laws tied to religious doctrine, since the collective debt is largely disguised as an individual's deserved suffering. The system achieves stabilization through continuous low magnitude system pressures, a chronic state of energetic imbalance. When the state attempts to introduce remedial law, remedies to resolve these issues, the resistance is not merely legal but ideological, because the energetic debt is anchored metaphysically. It's anchored in what they believe in. You see what I'm saying? So it's a higher level of coherence versus in the West, as far as chattel slavery, that was very low coherence. You see what I'm saying? That's on into coercion, making the imbalance resistant and to purely legal situations. So the more it's ingrained in the cultural beliefs of the people, even if you write laws to try to resolve the issue, it becomes harder. So that's interesting. It goes into the various layers of this or whatever. And and I don't know, even if you were trying to correct something with the law, whatever case may be, once it's ingrained in the mind of the people and it becomes tradition or whatever case may be, it's kind of stuck. Case study 2, U.S. chattel slavery and high volatility discharge. Now, this is going to be kind of like the case study with the U.S. chattel slavery. It's going to be kind of a different bag. The systematic instability of defining rational beings as property. The reliance on race-based chattel slavery created an immense energetic contradiction. Defining a sentient, self-renewing human being as absolute property was a systematic lie that could not be sustained by internal legal mechanisms alone. So just again, the law wasn't strong enough to just erase that contradiction. You see what I'm saying? That's an obvious contradiction. If a man crawls around on all fours like a dog, if we give him a dog bowl and stuff like that, that's a contradiction, and we can see that even though we play along with him being a dog or whatever case may be, in the back of our mind, he's a man still. You see what I'm saying? A human woman gave birth to that man. You see what I'm saying? So this system was highly volatile, requiring a constant and extensive legal framework backed by force, those rituals we're talking about, to subordinate the enslaved and free black populations. The high visibility of the race marker prevented the debt from being diffused or disguised ideologically as successfully as in the caste model or whatever case may be, because the way the the difference in appearance and phenotype of a African versus a European or whatever case may be. So you couldn't ignore the difference or whatever case may be is what it's saying. Um, let's see here. So basically, it's a contradiction to make a human being into property or whatever case may be. So just that contradiction alone or whatever, it's going to be negative blowback from that. The coercion is a thing. And it's a high volatility level of coercion or whatever case may be. It's codified into the law, but the contradiction is so great to the point where you can't even the law won't sustain it, because the ideology of the people and the understanding of the people or whatever, the tradition and culture of the people. You've seen people walking on two legs as human beings for so long or whatever case may be. When you see a person on all fours and you try to look at this person as a dog or whatever, it don't fly in your mind for real or whatever. So it requires more to make that a stable thing in society, similar to other things we got going on now in society or whatever case may be. You see what I'm saying? That's just an example how even contradictions of reality have a negative feedback. You see what I'm saying? Some of the stuff that's been going on, now, I ain't come from the woke community. I don't know what that is. I came from the old school conscious community. You see what I'm saying? Or I came from an iteration of it. You see what I'm saying? Well, I don't know what woke is. Woke is when they hijack the conscious community and they flipped it into some other crazy stuff or whatever case may be. I don't know what that is. You know what I'm saying? I don't subscribe to none of that nature. Okay, this system was highly volatile, requiring a constant. Okay, we talked about that. Okay, let me see here. Okay, lynchings is extra legal biofield feedback, discharge rituals, a system requiring acute chaotic correction. Okay. Um, the intense energetic tension generated by chattel slavery necessitated periodic acute releases of violence. Lynchings, extra legal executions often carried out by mobs without legal permission, served as high magnitude bioetheric feedback loop discharge rituals. Okay. Motivated by racial grievance, these acts instilled fear and reinforced racial supremacy, functioning as an extreme form of social control. Okay, the necessity of this is what I'll say right here. Okay, so those are ritual for the time in which that took place or whatever case may be. um you know, that somewhat stabilized the system, because it wasn't as far gone as it is now. You see what I'm saying? That might have stabilized the system to an extent. You see what I'm saying? Some of your underground groups and stuff like that that was on some hate crime type stuff or whatever case may be. I would say, um, to all the people who kind of feel that way and on some hate stuff, I'm not really on no hate stuff. This is just a case study, so we understanding how the energetic dynamics of how we treat each other in society. I'm not really trying to make nobody feel bad. I ain't trying to make nobody feel good. We just doing a case study about some stuff we know that happened in history or whatever case may be. Like I already said, this stuff that we know that happened in history that may have been, that may have caused a lot of chaos socially or whatever more here recently, here in the with Africans in the diaspora. Potentially, we can potentially go back and see that as an act of karma or whatever case may be, not to erase the weight of what that is and what that means or whatever case may be, but to kind of like I don't know, to just view it to view it in a different light. I say all that to say I know when things get kind of rough, people get scared in society. When society is collapsing, people get kind of scared and stuff like that, and they go out and they do things and they like to blame people for their problems or whatever case may be. Oh man, it's this group's fault because this is going on, or it's these people's fault because of that's going on. As we can see, we based on how far gone this thing is, you see what I'm saying? Those rituals that worked way back in the day, that's not gonna help you now. So there's no point in even trying to do nothing like that. it's no point in you see what I'm saying. This is a karmic thing that's been going on for hundreds of years at this point. So just how it was engineered, this stuff that we experiencing now, it was inevitable. How it's engineered, and we're gonna do a whole nother case study on America specifically, and we're gonna like compare the bioetheric engineering of kemet and how they functioned in accordance with the bioetheric feedback loop. And we're going to kind of like draw a parallel to how America is functioning. Do we function according to the bioetheric feedback loop? So all of this stuff that I'm talking about, this is the condition of this society. This is inevitable based on how it was founded, how it was set up and everything like that. And this ain't to throw shade on nobody, but it just kind of is what it is. You see what I'm saying? So so all the unaliving, all the cursing, all the calling people names, all the blaming people for this and for that, it don't even matter. I would suggest from on the American side of it, um if that's kind of how we rock it, and we know America is an amalgamation of various different groups of people, it's a melting pot. I would say as a collective, we got to kind of come together and solve our problems as a collective, maybe in our local communities and stuff like that. Start there or whatever case may be, instead of kind of like um I don't know, instead of randomly blaming people and stuff like that. That's another video rant for the day. You know what I'm saying? We almost done with this. You know what I'm saying? The necessity of relying on extra legal violence demonstrates that the substantive law defining slaves as property was fundamentally insufficient to contain the karmic volatility. So the law can modulate the karmic volatility of certain injustices, but once they get to a certain level, or based on the volatility of it, or whatever case may be, the law alone may not be enough to do it, and you have to rely on the executive type of function of some certain rituals of punishment or something like that to kind of quell that. While the caste system maintains stability through chronic ideological pain, chattel slavery attempted stability through periodic terrifying acute shocks. Crucially, lynchings were ultimately ineffective. Period. It's just like what I just said. Once the system has gone, those rituals will work. Those rituals of the strange fruit will work for so long, but they won't. That's not gonna work. Once you do so much dirt, you know what I'm saying, that don't work. You see what I'm saying? No amount of rituals, whether we go overseas and do it or do it here, no amount of rituals is gonna outrun the dead. You see what I'm saying? Crucially, lynching were ultimately ineffective procedural mechanisms. Their chaotic, illegal nature revealed the inherent illegitimacy of the system and accelerated the eventual corrective bioetheric feedback loop, culminating in the massive social movement of the civil rights era. Yeah, and when I say things like that, man, it's not directed at everybody from any particular group. You know what I'm saying? Much love to everybody, no matter where you at. We all people trying to make it, trying to live, trying to, what I'm saying, enjoy life. So it's not directed at any particular group. Case study. I mean, how we treat each other, how we deal with each other in society, it matters. It creates problems for people that's gonna be here after us. So historical precedent, ancient systems of dependency and devaluation, Roman clientela. So this is the Roman system. Moral debt and hierarchy as an energetic bond. The Roman clientela relationship between the patronus and the clients were hierarchical, involving mutual obligations that found formal expressions in legal definitions. The clients received legal aid, loans, and political sponsorship, offering in return loyalty, accompanying the patron and providing support. This structure stabilized the energetic imbalance not through legal contract, but through continuous moral debt found on good faith, ancestral custom, and loyalty. This exchange of favors did not cancel the relationship, but symbolized the personal bond, ensuring that loyalty and obligation will continuously transfer. This system served as a legal and social mechanism to mitigate the energetic shock following the manumissions of a slave, libertas, um, ensuring the ongoing transfer of service and loyalty even after legal state of slavery ended, thereby preventing a sudden massive discharge of accumulated debt. So that's more a system akin to what we were talking about potentially, let's say, like something like an indentured servant or something like that. It's not there's not really karmic debt associated with that. It's it's less coercion. It's more of a exchange. You see what I'm saying? Let's see here. Debt bondage across antiquity and modernity. Debt bondage is a persistent mechanism of institutionalizing inheritable debt, often allowing the indefinite control of a laborer whose freedom is tied to an undefined or excessive debt. This practice has deep historical roots and remains a prevalent form of forced labor globally, affecting marginalized groups, including those from caste affected communities. A notable historical corrective action against the bioetheric feedback loop mechanism was undertaken by Solon in ancient Athens. Solon is Plato's ancestor. His reforms canceled existing land debt and explicitly prohibited the practice of debt slavery. All right. So his corrective laws, or whatever case may be. This dramatic intervention represents a rare example of substantive law. Substantive law is the substance of a doctrine. You see what I'm saying? Like for example, let's say like you might have insurance. Insurance is a concept or whatever case may be, but insurance comes out of the doctrine of subrogation as far as substantive law is concerned. That as an example, proactively and comprehensively clearing a large amassed collective debt, analogous to societal jubilee, by resetting the energetic ledger. Solon prevented catastrophic volatility and allowed Athenian society to thrive commercially. All right. Uh, so he adjusted the substance of the doctrine. This demonstrates the substance of the doctrine is likened unto the theme. You see what I'm saying? How we talk about some symbols, patterns, and principles, talk about themes and stuff like that. As it pertains to law, the substance of the doctrine is associated with the theme. Um, Demonstrates that acute, decisive legal action is capable of shifting the collective energetic pattern away from systemic failure. So it's back to like what we were saying or whatever. Lawyers and judges or the people who create the law, because there's a metaphysical aspect of the law. It's metaphysical in nature. So the people who write the law or what have you, or participate in the changing of the law, or even operate in the law, whatever case may be, they're the equivalent of modern day priests. Because as we're seeing here, they're modulating the energetic framework of a society. You see, sometimes it's more or less effective. You see what I'm saying? And the various different branches of the law or whatever case may be, whether it be the judicial branch, the executive branch, and everything like that, they have different functions in this process. Instead of, let's say, like a society um, having certain rituals that they perform to modulate the energy or whatever case may be, from a legal perspective, that will be built into the executive branch. The military or whatever case may be will enact certain rituals of enforcement or whatever case may be to offset certain things or whatever. So it's interesting. It's called something different, but again, as we look at the um, bioetheric um, engineering of it, it looks a little bit different when we explore it. So the rewriting of collective karma, legal and metaphysical offsets, the role of remedial law. Okay, the remedy, basically the remedy. You know what I'm saying? Such and such owe me some money. I need to get paid. Okay, boom. The remedy is me getting paid. Them paying me my money. Restoring equilibrium in free labor ideas. The rewriting of collective karma requires the implementation of substantive law designed to actively reverse and dissolve the legal structures of revaluation. Right. The substance of the doctrine. Right. Following U.S. chattel slavery, the 13th Amendment and the accompanying free labor idea established a new judicial principle. Energy, time, and talent are defined as the inherent property of the person, right? So basically, the 13th Amendment said you can, it kind of adjusted the substance of the law in the sense that a person cannot be enslaved unless they commit a crime. You see what I'm saying? So that's a whole nother conversation in itself. And we might do the bioetheric engineering of imprisonment. Yeah, that'll be an interesting one. Matter of fact, we'll do that. This directly reverses the core energetic lie of slavery, mandating that the core energetic lie of slavery being a person, a human being, is less than human, or is property. That was a core energetic lie, and that paradox alone caused negative blowback. The mandating that the societal system must compensate for human labor justly based on a person's inherent rights rather than claiming domination over property. Right? The societal system must compensate for human labor justly. Got to pay you for your labor, based on a person's inherent rights. You know what I'm saying? Human rights, rather than them claiming domination over property. A significant challenge in clearing historical karmic debt lies in the legal principle that substantive law must usually be applied prospectively, only affecting events moving forward. All right. This limitation means, okay, hold on one second. A significant challenge in clearing historical karmic debt lies in the legal principle that substantive law must usually be applied prospectively, only affecting events moving forward. So you can't, if you change the substance of the doctrine today, you can't undo wrongs that were done in the past. This limitation means that past debts accumulated under the old oppressive substantive law often require separate remedial actions. So the only way you can undo that, or kind of balance that, would be with remedies, or the remedial law, the remedial action, such as reparations or specific retroactive compensation. That's why people constantly talking about reparations, or whatever case may be, to achieve true energetic balance. While the 13th Amendment corrected substantive definition of the personhood, modern exploitation mechanism, and as I'm talking about this stuff, I know my, my obvious ethnic background. I'm trying to really give a balanced perspective on this. You see what I'm saying? I'm trying not to lean one way or another, and trying to just call this right down the middle. So you see what I'm saying? I know I can't help but to offend some people. I mean, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs, so that's just how we're gonna do it. But it's not my intention to offend anybody or anything like that. I'm literally doing a case study on this. I'm really trying my best to call it right down the middle. As you can see, that's just something that came up. The reparations thing just came up. So that's just a conversation. That's an aspect of how to correct that, because you cannot correct it. You can't correct the substance of a doctrine of the past, or whatever case may be, the damage that it did. The only way you can do that is with a remedy, with which reparations is a form of remedy. Okay, so let me see here. To achieve true energetic balance, while 13th Amendment corrected the substantive definition of personhood, it corrected the doctrine, the substantive definition of personhood. Modern exploitation mechanisms, wage theft, predatory lending, exploits procedural flaws, allowing the energetic capture of that personal property to continue, demonstrating that procedural karma requires ongoing corrective modulation. So even in the procedural laws that follow, um, you may change the substance of the doctrine, but there may be some kind of carryover from the procedural laws, some sort of holdover, carryover in the existing procedural laws, or outdated laws, or whatever, that may have stemmed from that, the previous doctrine before it was corrected. You see what I'm saying? So correcting the substance of a doctrine, adjusting the theme. You see what I'm saying? Basically what we talking about, from a law perspective, or whatever case may be. You see what I'm saying? Okay, and that affects the patterns, the procedural law that comes out of that. You see what I'm saying? Modern mechanisms of biotheory induction, predatory lending, and wage theft. Despite, I know it's a long one, but y'all, appreciate y'all sticking in with me. We're almost done with this. You see what I'm saying? Okay, modern mechanisms of bioetheric feedback loop inhibition, predatory lending, and wage theft. Despite the establishment of free labor idea, modern legal and economic systems facilitate exploitation that inhibit financial self-renewal, functionally trapping vulnerable populations in cycles reminiscent of ancient debt bondage. Despite the establishment of the free labor idea, right? You get paid for your labor. Modern legal and economic systems facilitate exploitation that inhibits financial self-renewal because, okay, if you're not viewed as a person for 800 years, hypothetical, I'm just saying, hypothetical situation, 200 years, 100 years, whatever case may be, for 100 years in a society, let's say the untouchables, however the case may be, and they change the law tomorrow, um, there's 100 years of momentum in the mind of people, in the psyche of people, of you not being a full human being or whatever. So it's gonna take time. Changing the law is not enough. It's gonna take time for that to cycle out of the mentality of people, kind of like how we talked about in the previous case study. So predatory lending through high interest rates and deceptive practices acts as a systematic bioetheric feedback loop trap, continuously draining the victim's capacity for prosperity and reinforcing the inherited energetic predisposition toward lack. Furthermore, wage theft constitutes a direct ongoing extraction of personal energy and property without compensation. Legal mechanisms for wage recovery are critical coercive measures. The Wage Theft Prevention and Wage Recovery Act seek to increase transparency and accountability to bolster the recovery of stolen wages. Okay, legislative intervention as karmic correction, usury laws, and labor protection. Okay, let's see here. Legislative intervention serves as a targeted bioetheric feedback loop correction mechanism designed to limit the speed and magnitude of energetic feedback. Usury laws, capping interest rates such as 36% annual percentage rate limit for consumer loans acts to inhibit the exponential growth of accumulated debt since unlimited interest rates. Hold on one second here. Let's get past that because I don't want to get into the uh let me see. Transparency and accountability requiring employers to provide initial disclosure of employment terms and regular pay stub directly counter the energetic obfuscation inherent. So they're talking about the nuances of how a person can still be exploited procedurally, even though they have laws in place or they've um, enacted, let's say, like free labor laws. They're no longer enslaving people. They no longer, a person is not property. You have to pay them for their labor. But they're talking about in the procedural nuances of the law, they can still kind of get over and stuff like that. And that has to be consistently modulated. So, metaphysical methods of societal karmic clearance. True and lasting societal liberation requires a shift away from self-grasping and the conscious application of karmic law for liberation from past ignorance. The power of forgiveness and accountability. Forgiveness is a powerful individual act that reclaims personal peace and self-worth. However, the collective karmic clearance, the metaphysical benefits of forgiveness must be preceded by structural accountability. So it ain't enough for somebody to just forgive you. You got to be accountable for it first. You see what I'm saying? Okay, the injured party, the victim group, cannot be expected to find peace until the debt creating party, the dominant society state, acknowledges the energetic violation. So that's why even in court, even in, when you go to court and stuff like that, they try to get you to feel some level of remorse for whatever you did. You see what I'm saying? That actually helps you out of your situation if it shows that you felt some level of remorse. If you show that you, again, the malicious intent. When we get into the bioetheric engineering, the homicide, when we get into malicious intent and everything like that, that's a part of it. You see what I'm saying? It's not the same to unalive somebody accidentally as it is to do it with malicious intent. It's reflected in the law. You see what I'm saying? I think it's called malum in se, evil in itself, or what have you, when you unalive somebody, what have you, legally. But it's a different thing to do it. It's different levels of manslaughter and things of that nature. But it's a difference. You see what I'm saying? Karmically, as it were. Um, And you can see it because with certain levels of unaliving, it's more of a trauma bond that is developed between the victim and the person committing the offense. Remedial law and the compensatory actions thus serves as the necessary societal act of acknowledgement required to initiate the collective healing process. Dissolution of miasms, energetic repatterning. Miasms is like generational curses, basically. And in this case, we're talking about the law modulating the karma. It's codifying generational curses. You see what I'm saying? Or the law actually has the power to do that if it's not used properly. Okay, so dissolution of miasms, energetic repatterning, systemic debt, and inherited suffering, viewed as social miasms, inherited energy disharmonies, require specific targeted action to dissolve the ingrained energetic blueprint, just as epigenetic factors can create variation from the same genetic blueprint. Remedial law must be designed not merely to change outward behavior, but to fundamentally shift the core societal pattern of debt transfer, karmic debt transfer, and exploitation. You see what I'm saying? Coercion. You know what I'm saying? Mistreatment of people within within the law being codified. You see what I'm saying? It creates that debt that we're talking about, allowing for genuine energetic repatterning, and systemic self-renewal. Conclusion and recommendations. So y'all made it to the end. I appreciate y'all for rocking with me again. This is a case study. This is Ether Illustrated, another episode of Ether Illustrated. We're examining these things to gain new nuances and stuff like that. Um, Examining these things to understand how our relationships with people function, how the law functions within our relationships with people, our relationships as a society. We are part of a collective. We are part of a community of people and stuff like that. Wherever you from, wherever you at, you see what I'm saying? So how we treat people, how we interact with people actually matters. So we kind of getting into that and getting into that part of the bioetheric feedback loop. I just skimmed over this. This is kind of getting into some of the legal implications and what the law actually entails on an energetic level as far as a bioetheric feedback loop. This right here, this subject matter here, this is a whole other section of this stuff. This could be, I mean, volume upon volume of this could be made as far as the law is concerned. You see what I'm saying? But I mean, you could take individual cases and break them down energetically and stuff like that. That's, I'm here for a strong time, not a long time on that subject matter. So we're not gonna get into all that. We may do a couple more case studies, or if it's something somebody want to hear, or whatever, we'll do, other case studies on maybe cases or different things or whatever case may be. But we were just kind of like getting into the implications of I don't know, how we view each other in society. You see what I'm saying? And how we treat people in society. Again, the case studies we did in this piece were kind of extreme examples, but it manifests on smaller levels in the workplace, within our families, within, you see what I'm saying, our communities and our groups and stuff like that. So this is just kind of a window into that. Okay, so the analysis of karma and the bioetheric feedback loop demonstrates the codified law functions as the primary mechanism for a society to manage or mismanage its energetic debt. Because remember, we talked about kemet as a resonant circuit. We get into that. Laws designed to stabilize oppressive systems, such as those defining chattel slavery or institutionalized caste hierarchy, function by diminishing the perceived magnitude of the violation. The law can diminish the perceived magnitude of the violation. The judicial system or whatever, the legislative branch of government or whatever case may be, it's not good or bad. It's just a thing, and it modulates this energy in the society. We don't have, let's say we have people who practice individual religions. Now, if I can take a religious system and I can filter it through the bioetheric feedback loop, but I can come up with the bioetheric engineering of Christianity, of Ifa, of Apollo, or whatever case may be. I can take the legal system and I can filter that through the bioetheric feedback loop and get the bioetheric engineering of the actual legal system. And as it turns out, as we examine what a priest does in Ifa, a priest does in Palo, or whatever case may be, though there's both of them in both systems, they're both priests, but the engineering of the system is different. So the function of the priest changes with the engineering of the system. The same thing like this. As it turns out, based on their function, as we looking at the judge, the lawyer, all of those are kind of like function in modern times like priests would. Why we say that? Because if ma'at or balance or equilibrium is similar to pressure mediation, like um, um, contracting and expanding as far as the blood vessels do to mitigate the pressure in mitigate your blood pressure or whatever. They mitigate the energetic pressure within a society with the laws and things or whatever case may be. So they have a major responsibility. It's almost like a modern day priesthood. So that's an interesting contrast. Okay, so the contrast between the U.S. chattel slavery and the Indian caste system illustrates the inverse power dynamic between legal definition and ideological justification. Chattel slavery, resting on the unstable legal definition of property, required frequent high magnitude discharge rituals, lynchings, to contain its volatility. The caste system, anchored in deep ideological justification, past life trauma, achieve greater stability through chronic internalized debt, making the energetic imbalance far more resistant to corrective legal measures. The lower the overall volatility of the karmic violation and foster systematic equilibrium, legal structures must move beyond stabilization and actively pursue corrective actions. Right. So the basically the law has the ability to make evil fair seeming if it's not used correctly. But the purpose of the law in actuality is it's to help this energetic system. It's man's version of helping this feedback loop. It's man's version of the feedback loop, basically. On a corrective type of way, on a legal type of way. It's man's I don't know, reproduction of the feedback loop. So um yeah, we just wanted to I know that was wow, I didn't realize that one was that long. Um but yeah, I appreciate y'all for checking me out. If y'all like what y'all been hearing, like and subscribe. Future videos may not be that long, the 2 hour mark, but I appreciate y'all for checking me out. Um I guess the next issue of Ether Illustrated, we're gonna get into the bioetheric engineering of homicide. We'll get into the. I want to do that bioetheric engineer, the bioetheric engineering of imprisonment, because we just talked about how the people who deal with the law, they're modern day priests of this day and time. We talk about how you can only be enslaved if you commit a crime. You see what I'm saying? Um, when you commit a crime, crimes are called charges. You see what I'm saying? It's like an auditing. You see what I'm saying? There's a bond associated with the crimes in the case. You see what I'm saying? The length of the sentence is associated with the value of the bond. You see what I'm saying? So we need to. I want to get into some of that energetically. Y'all stay tuned, man. We're gonna keep it pushing. Peace and blessings. Peace to the gods, man.